when I was diagnosed with my little illness, I mean, I got into huge trouble from friends of mine who said, well, how can how do you dare take things like that, it's intensely personal things, and make them public? But the real thing is that you have to have those narratives. You have to talk about them. The way, I mean, that's a contribution that you can make to society. Get people to talk about stuff that they feel uncomfortable about talking, and maybe things change. Maybe we can make the world change if we talk about them.
Let's talk communication today with Walter Pike. I'm Talana Simpson, and in today's show, I spoke with Walter Pike. Walter is a recognized thought leader, marketing, branding, and social media expert. We spoke about how to have conversations that count, especially around difficult subjects like rape, and have these conversations with the people close to us, and from there right out to larger audiences and even the world using social media. Walter, I've got to follow you a lot over the years on Facebook and Twitter, and really admired how you speak up, especially around difficult topics. And I'm very much interested in what I call conversations that count, because I often feel that we need to be talking more about certain topics and feelings and maybe experiences. We find it so difficult to have those important conversations because they're emotional and sometimes even personal, that we shy away from them. And yet, if we actually had them, we would get so much more and deal with some issues. So really what I wanted to just talk to you about was almost like what allows you to have these kind of conversations, because you have them a lot, even in the public sphere. You're very active, online and that. So perhaps just to set the scene is, I thought of just asking, or we're starting by having what I call a conversation that counts. I was wondering if there's a topic or an issue that you believe we need to be talking more about in this world.
Actually, there's so many. I mean, recently, of course, we've had this shooting in the States, and that brings up a whole lot of discussions on race and on people not thinking about stuff. And then we've got things like the big problems that we've got in South Africa over rape and femicide, people killing intimate partners. Those are big issues. Education is, the al-Bashir thing is, and I mean, and just to even talk about that, and I had when I was diagnosed with my little illness, I mean, I got into huge trouble from friends of mine who said, well, how do you dare take things like that, it's intensely personal things, and make them public? But the real thing is that you have to have those narratives. You have to talk about them. The way, I mean, that's a contribution that you can make to society. Get people to talk about stuff that they feel uncomfortable about talking, and maybe things change. Maybe we can make the world change if we talk about them. So that's, I mean, so I've also got old enough to be eccentric, and I really don't care what people think of me. So if they think I'm an idiot for having said that, then that's tough.
So part of then what allows you then to have these conversations is just not caring what other people think.
Well, I mean, I think it's maybe having confidence in yourself. I don't need other people to validate me in that I need to be doing stuff that they approve of. I'm quite happy to do stuff that I approve of, or to say things in the way that I approve of them, and so I'm not worrying that much about how I'm viewed. It's not like there's a strategy that says, Walter, I need to be able to work in this way or do something like that. It's much more, this is what I believe now, and I'm going to share it with you. And hopefully as well, I grow out of that, because I don't ever try and put out things as if, I know it all. I'm putting out things to talk about them and to change my thinking and to help me think. And if I can do that, maybe create some kind of mirror or some well that other people can gaze into, and out of that get something that helps them think about new things in a different way.
So is there anything then that you believe is like stopping so many of us from having these conversations? Because for me, there's also maybe we should just separate. There's two ways we can have these conversations. One is obviously in a public forum, which is your world, like the social media. We're going to talk a bit about what you call directed activism and that. Okay. So that's online. But then there's also just even being able to have these kind of conversations with the people close to you, with your friends, with your your lover, your parents, your kids. And yet, it's a lot of people even find those like behind closed doors, so not so public, quite difficult. So with those like two scenarios, I suppose my question is there anything that you aware of that maybe stops people from having, that you think might be? So obviously it's a part of it is a confidence in ourselves that we can talk about subjects and know it's not about us, it's about a topic that we're talking about, and we might learn if we explore these issues. Just wondering if there's anything else that comes to mind.
I haven't really thought about that, but listening to what you said, it actually maybe it's a continuation of the same point I made before. I think it's probably harder to have conversations with people that are close to you, because you might value those judgments more than you would people in general. I mean, it would hurt me, for example, if my daughter didn't, thought that I was an idiot, much more than if, Jacob Zuma thought I was an idiot.
Yes, obviously it's closer. But then, so for example, with your daughter, I mean, are there any times where you talk about some of these? So if we use the example then to make a context, I mean, you were very involved about the rape issues happening in South Africa.
Yeah.
That for me was, where I started thinking about you when I wanted to try and have some of these conversations that count. So have you ever spoken to her about rape and what it means, and I don't know if you wanted to share, but start talking maybe to put it in context, the kind of the emotional issues that are involved in that conversation.
When I got involved in Slut Walk, it was actually to a large extent because of her, and she was, I suppose, I think she was 12 or 13 at the time, and I kind of just woke up the one morning and thought, she's going to be a woman soon, and how do you prepare her, and how would I prepare her for sort of getting out into the world of women, not being a woman myself, So part of that was to say, well, I need to have these conversations, but I also know that in many cases, parents, when they're talking to their children, kind of say things, but then when the crunch comes, maybe the judgment changes, I would support you forever, but when it all hits the fan, it becomes, how did you do that? You shamed me kind of story. So I thought that maybe being part of building Slut Walk gives me an opportunity to be involved with having those discussions with her, and we certainly did from when she was 13. In fact, at 13, she was marching in the front row of Slut Walk. And some people are saying to me, how can you put a 13-year-old girl, your daughter, in front of something like this, which is so radical and so hectic? But actually, I needed to do it. I wanted to do that because because I didn't want it to be something that was radical. I wanted it to be something that she believed in and felt was right and just natural. And I think a part of her level of self-confidence today might be, I hope, part of that kind of support that I've been able to give her, being able to say, well, I'm not going to control you and tell you how to behave. What I'm going to do is I'm going to empower you to be able to make those decisions in a way where you felt that there was no judgment. So kind of there goes judgment again. I haven't really thought about this in great detail, but there comes judgment again. She feels that she's not going to be judged, to the extent that she would wear her slut walk T-shirt to hockey practice, and walk around school with this quite radical thing. Now, maybe it's worth actually telling the people listening what slut walk is about. In case
I was going to ask you, yes, just to give the context.
Well, what are you talking about? And slut walk is an anti-rape movement, or really an anti-victim blaming kind of movement. The idea is that many people blame the victim for their rape. I mean, you find that a lot of times. She shouldn't have been dressed like that. She was asking for it. Look, that silly girl is so drunk. She's asking to get raped. And clearly, that's just nonsense. I mean, nobody asks to get raped, and in no ways ever can the victim of a rape or a rape survivor be blamed for their rape. I mean, even if she's having an orgy and is with 10 guys, if there's such a thing, a tensome, 11th, the 12th guy can't just get involved in that and invite himself in. Each one of those things is, it's her choice in that case. And it came from, and it became an international movement. It spread from Vancouver, where some policeman was giving advice to some students, telling them, if you don't want to get raped, then don't dress like a slut, to around the world, because obviously there was a reaction that came back from that said, I can dress like a slut if I want to. I can even be a slut if I want to. And it's really got, and calling people sluts is really controlling, and a controlling word. So that's what we did. We tried to create a way for people who believed that there was this right to choose. And what has moved into now, the thing of not say no means no, but yes means yes. So the whole rape discussion has kind of got from this permission to yes means yes, which is like enthusiastic participation, rather than just if I say no, I don't want it, which is the assumption is if you don't say no, then I can do what I like with you. So those discussions are to be able to, and I felt that to be able to get her to have those discussions with me would be empowering for her, and allow her to have those discussions with people of her own age. And at one stage, she and one of her friends at school, these are 13-year-olds, 13, 14-year-olds, was to think about how they would be able to take that conversation and share that with their friends, or with people like them, other 14-year-olds, in other schools around Johannesburg. And they did start, although they didn't carry on with it, as 14-year-olds sometimes don't, trying to put up a support group for people, people like us. So yeah, there we go, on a bit of a tangent, I suppose. Okay. But it's still I think it's still part of that, having the confidence in yourself to be able to say what you mean, and not feel as though you have to please somebody, but much more that you are happy to stand up and be counted. And if my children have been able to learn that, then I think I've done a good job as a parent.
because then part of that, what you say now, is the confidence in yourself to stand up, and have that conversation, and it's almost to not take someone's reaction personally, because I mean, when you're talking about rape, like you're saying, and whether it's the victims or victim blaming versus or not, and because I think one of the points that then must come up, well, what is the man's, if it's mostly men that rape women, so what are the men's role in that? It's also very touchy subject. So hold on, I know my question's rambling on a bit, but
that's fine.
It's what I find, I suppose, in having these conversations is I've had to learn that to not take it personally when the person gets upset or, comes back at me and almost attacks me for having a difference in opinion. But at the same time, also allow the other person to have a difference of opinion. So it's kind of, so as you say, the judgment is a lot of very much part of having these kind of conversations. If we can just stop judging each other and rather just try and hear each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think that's right. I think you have to suspend judgment in having those in having any kind of conversation. But having said that, I'm actually very intolerant of people who don't make sense, if you know what I mean. I mean, if somebody constructs a really just ridiculous argument, and I've been involved in quite a few of them in the sort of pro-gun lobby, and ridiculous straw man arguments like don't kill people, people kill people, and things like that, which don't. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I mean, which don't actually hold water when you test them up against logic. And I really do like discussing things with people who are logical. And if they're not prepared to be logical, then I'm probably quite happy to walk away from it. But that doesn't mean that if somebody attacks or approaches my logic and says, well, Walter, you're not being that logical, then I mean, I'm very happy to engage for hours in those kinds of debates, but not in shallow rhetoric and stuff like that. I'm quite easy, I'm quite likely just to say, well, this is just not worth me spending any time on it. So, so when you take the man's role in rape and saying, well, I mean, in fact, I mean, men are usually mostly involved in rape. The victims or the recipients on the other side are both men and women,
yes.
to a large extent. So, I mean, in fact, the number of boys that are raped is scary. I mean, it's huge numbers. But the excuse, the thing that's a movement like Slut Walk does have is it gives people an excuse to talk about it. You create. And this kind of goes back into my directed activism methodology, is you've created a social object, a reason for people to get together and talk about something. And in some way, when you talk about things under this guise of something like an anti-rape movement, like a protest movement, you are excused from it being that personal. You can talk about it as if it was a third party. You can talk about it as if it was an object of some sort, and I think that helps a lot in trying to get things to go on. I can talk about Slut Walk, but I'm not actually talking about somebody who's really close to me who's just been raped. I'm talking about something which is slightly less personal. And I think that all revolves around those feelings of self-worth, of your own self-esteem, you're wanting to not be judged, and understanding, how to do that, how not to do that. And also it's important to try and help people who are feeling judged, to get them confident so that they can express what they're saying. And then, I mean, when I say I'm intolerant, I mean, I am, but I'm much more likely, if somebody presents an argument, to question them about their argument than just to dismiss it and walk away.
And so, I want to move on now to direct activism, but just to wrap up then what you're saying, and I think you said it quite early in the conversation, that the reason you like these debates and that is so that you yourself can learn more.
Yes.
So I just want to if you can just talk a bit about that and the, why it's so important to have these conversations then.
Well, I think...
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, if you're convinced of your point of view and your logic, I think it depends on. Why would you do that? It again depends on your own self-image and your own self-worth. Do you believe that you've got to defend your belief, or are you happy to discuss the things that you believe in? And I find that there are some basis. We all have got some basis in which we're not going to deviate from. I suppose you've got morals and and values,
ethics and things and values. But in amongst that, there are lots of debates that are worth having, because part of that helps you reaffirm your own values. If you can discuss them with other people, it assists you in saying, yes, well, I've now had this out with somebody else who doesn't believe in anything I believe in, and actually it makes me feel stronger about the things that I believe in. So I think it's valuable to do that, and I think we should always be questioning everything and always looking at ourselves. Because if we don't do that, we're just not going to change, and surviving is about change, and so we've got to not be solid rock. We've got to be able to be a little bit malleable, within the constructs of how we see the world. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and it links so much to what I teach around self-esteem, and that is that your esteem is unconditional. You are a valuable person, and your beliefs and the meanings, the expressions of you is what changes and needs to grow and develop. So if we can make that separation between us as human beings and then our human doings, the very simplified way that I explain it, it's much easier then to have the conversations, because you're just talking about an idea and trying to understand the meanings you give to that experience, that idea, and it's not actually personal about you. So then if we move on into your directed activism, maybe we can just start then by explaining a bit more what you mean by that, because it's quite an interesting term.
What I was doing is I was looking at I suppose my business is marketing, so I'm looking at what marketing is, and the idea of marketing is to spread ideas. We are trying to spread an idea that one product is better than the other, or that you should come to this ballet rather than go and watch the cricket, or whatever it is. We need to be spreading ideas. So I looked at how the world changed and how media or online media has changed dramatically from old-fashioned broadcast media, when the control of the message was in the hands of people who had the money to either own a radio station or a TV station, or else had the money to buy timeshare on that TV station, so programs and ads and things like that. But here we are having a television conversation, in our studies or rooms in Joburg, and we broadcasting to the world. So that control has changed. So in this new media landscape, what really has happened, or the most important thing has happened, is that media has changed from a site of information, where the information is provided to people, to a site of coordination, where people can talk to each other and use each other's feelings and build onto each other's feelings, and use that to spread ideas. So I built a methodology which I think is still a little bit, maybe a bit, it'll become popular in 20 years' time.
Ahead of its time.
Yeah, but the idea is that what you need to do to understand how to spread ideas is to understand what the idea is. You need to understand the structure of the people who care about those ideas. who are the leaders, who they're connected to, how those connections work. So I work a lot with a technique called social network analysis. They also call it graph theory if somebody wants to Google it. And that looks at the structures of conversations, how people are grouped, how people are linked, and how ideas move through networks, through societies, and things like that. And then what I do is I empower the people who care, and I've used the term activists. I empower people who care, being the activists, to help them spread their message where their message is in line with my client's message. Be my client a political party, be my client a social change agenda, be my client a brand of some sort, and by facilitating that conversation that's happening in the space, which is not only the online space, because nobody exists online only. People exist as people, and ideas move from Twitter to radio to television to back to Facebook, onto Instagram, back onto radio. All of those things are happening all the time. So what I'm trying to do is to find a path and a way to move those ideas through the society. So I mean, that's kind of in a nutshell. So it's spreading ideas in what I've called the post-broadcast era or the social era. Do you want more detail?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think of where to go from that, because it's very interesting, because I think when you talked about the graphing, I think you said.
Yes.
Because I mean, I think before we had social media, obviously ideas still travel. They just maybe didn't travel as fast. Because you're saying we are social beings, so we would still talk to each other and we'd pass information on. But now we can track it. Is that?
Well, I mean, you could track it in the past as well. It's just that we would probably never do it. The thing that social has allowed us to do is to increase the number of people that we can interface with. There's an old English sociologist by the name of John Dunbar who came up with a number called Dunbar's number, which said that you're only able to maintain relationships with a certain number of people. Human beings, it's around about 125 people. We have close relationships, though, with only about 12 people. The people that are the people that we would have around for a Christmas dinner or something like that. Those are the sort of our very, very close friends. But actually, the value of our weak links, our links to people who are not our close friends, is actually where a hell of a lot of the value in our lives come from. I mean, we're more likely to get new job ideas from people who are not our close bosom buddies than we are from our close links. We're likely to get new ideas that are going to change the way we think from people that are outside of that group, because just almost by definition, when we operate in groups, we practice a thing called group think. I mean, we can't help it. It's as we convince each other that we are that we're right. We continue to sort of be in that group. And I used to run a little think tank called the Idea Orgy, and the Idea Orgy was meant to be a place where ideas were not cloned. In other words, where people who were close to each other didn't take their own idea and just pass it along, but where new ideas came into the group. Sexual reproduction of ideas as opposed to asexual reproduction of ideas would create brand new ideas, hybrid ideas, genetically modified ideas, and out of that would come whole new ways of thinking about stuff. And certainly it works, but as soon as you bring even these diverse people into the same space, after you've done it a couple of times, they become the Idea Orgy crowd, and they become a group again. And although there's some diversity in that, eventually the thinking process that made that group cohesive makes us think in that same cohesive space. So what we're trying to do with spreading ideas is to understand that ideas replicate themselves. And as they move through society, they'll replicate themselves. If you can understand what the society looks like, you can assist those ideas to replicate themselves, and you can move them through the area. Now, there was a guy a couple of years ago who did some work on obesity in the States, and he looked at how obesity spreads, and he found out that your chances of being obese are greatly increased by your friends' chances of being obese, but also your friends' chances of being obese. So and in that connection, instead of using, he didn't use social media to do that. What he did was he just looked at people in a community, just pulled together people and looked at who was friends with whom because they told him they were, and put that together. So these communities, this idea of this community, this idea of things being linked to each other and with communication is not a new thing at all. It's just that whereas, I only had 20, 30 friends before, I now have tens of thousands of friends that I can influence or I can connect with in some way or other.
Yeah, because I know you've shown me some of those diagrams that come up that shows you how messages, spread, and how the maps, all the little dots with all the lines. It's really amazing to see.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing. It's also amazing to see how there's always, or that our audiences are not in the way that we always have thought of them. Which is, when we're talking about ordinary marketing, we see our audiences as homogeneous. I mean, that's what marketing segmentation means. It says finding homogeneous groups of people, and so we think that everybody's flat and everybody's the same. But when we take ourselves away from that and we move into saying, well, not only how did the message get from us to those people, to our audience, but how the message gets from our audience to their friends and their connections, that's when everything changes, and that's where everything becomes really, really interesting. And I mean, you can see it. I mean, you can see it when there's big things that happen in the South African Twitter sphere, I will track it, like Zelda Lagrange and her Zelda van Riebeck story. I mean, I tracked that and saw where everybody was going. There was a recent thing on Appletiser where there was an Appletiser ad that sort of turned into this thing against Appletiser. Now, I know what the structure of that conversation is. I can see who drove that conversation. I can even detect how it started and where it came from and who the first people that 4 days after this ad had been released who suddenly turned it into a big issue on Sunday morning when they were bored. So something was just held apart. So now, if I'm looking to see as to how does a company like Appletiser look after its brand, knowing who the people are that are on your side and the people that aren't is really, really useful. Knowing how to have a conversation about race or about rape or about anything, and knowing the people who care about it, our activists, is also really, really useful. But you do that not by saying, you've got a clout score of 67 or something, and that you've got an audience of this. What you do is to say, what kind of role does this individual play in the conversation about specific topic? And so when I work with things like social media crisis management, and when I work with things like trying to advise agencies how to work with their clients, brands, and who the people that are the links, and who are the gatekeepers, and who are the mayors of the hashtag. That kind of information, in my mind, is incredibly important. You know, unfortunately for my consulting practice, that penny hasn't dropped with everybody as yet. People are still seeing it as flat, as a flat audience, whereas the internet has changed those rules completely. So as I go prattling on.
No, it's fascinating, and I'm just trying to think how to bring it back to like myself, my audience. So it would be.
Well, you see, I mean, if I took, let's just go back to the slut walk and talk to the rape audience, you know, and you have a big number of society, a lot of them, who believe actually that who maybe not implicitly or explicitly believe that the woman who is raped, or the rape victim, is in a way responsible. I mean, I've had these conversations hundreds of times of people who say, well, you know, she shouldn't dress like that, or, you know, you don't take a bag of money into Elof Street because somebody's going to rob it from you. You know, it's your fault for having taken it. Now, there is a logic to that. That says that, but that could be a group of people in the society. There's another group of the society. Now, I don't know if you remember, after the first or the second slut walk, I was massively criticized for being a man involved in a woman's issue. I mean, clearly, rape isn't a woman's issue. Rape is society's issue. It's, you know, because there are men and women involved, and children and everybody else involved in it. It's clearly not a man's issue only. I mean, how ridiculous! But there's also those group of people who see themselves in this feminist, strong feminist group that feel that men by being involved in this woman's issue are somehow disempowering the woman. Then there are just people like my daughter, who are a bunch of kids who completely don't have a view about this at all. And then you've got bunches of people who feel that they would never ever be able to deal with the word slut. This word slut is so emotionally loaded. So when you look at the society and you start analyzing it, you find those groups of people. If you can also find how those groups of people are connected, because in many cases there's somebody who's a member of the child group, me and my daughter and her school kids, and also a member of maybe the people who can't abide by this victim blaming thing. So I'm now in two groups. Now, it's possible for me to carry the message from the one group to the other group. Without me in that picture, it's almost impossible to get the message to move from the one group to the other group, unless you can do it by big advertising campaigns and try and blast into these groups. But if the group is so established in its way of thinking that it doesn't, that it builds a barrier to information coming into it, you'll never be able to move into that group unless you're able to have a personal connection with somebody in that group. So if you know the structures, if you know who the people are, you know the people that are the bridges, if you know how ideas are able to move, then you would take a completely different view of how you talk to those people, because you could, and I don't know if you are, but I mean, you could be talking, preaching to the choir, so to speak. I could be preaching to the choir if I just talk to the people who are my audience. I mean, they are my audience because they like what I say. I make very little impact, or I can make very little impact onto a group of people who just like what I say because they're already there. The impact that I make, or must make, is to make it to a group of people who don't believe what I say, or don't care, or have another viewpoint. So people like me and my personality are the people that take ideas from the one group to the next group to the next group and link with these big groups. It's really useful to know who those people are when you're trying to spread ideas. I've done quite a lot of work in politics, and been involved with the election campaigns and things like that. But it's really interesting to know the people that, and usually they're not millions of them, to know the top 10 people that are driving the discussion, that are working with the discussion. Because if you can engage with them, you don't actually have to convince them to be on your side. What you have to do is to get them to have a conversation with somebody who sees something differently to them. Because again, one of the things that happens online is that most of the people involved online are lurkers. They don't do anything. They might like the odd post or maybe never comment on posts, but they're still there and they're watching the people who do comment on posts. So if you can understand what's happening on that stage where people are commenting on posts, and you can understand how to move those conversations through, you've got a really good chance of changing the world. And I mean, there's some things which are about changing the world which is like bad, because you might convince people to get involved in some kind of genocide because that's the message you want to spread. But most of it, if you give people the right kind of information and you allow them to participate in this conversation and examine ideas and give them the tools to be able to examine those ideas, you've got a really good chance of them adopting those ideas and then them moving through the, step by step, from group to group by group to group. If you don't know who those people are, it's just hit and miss. You just put out that ideas as many times as you can and hope something's happening. If you're not analyzing what people are talking about and knowing what the semantics are in those groups, you don't know how to link those groups together. And I mean, that's the sort of underlying basis of the science and the way that I think communication is going to move to in the future. I mean, it is hectic because it's not as easy as just producing a radio ad. But I think that people that understand those nuances are the people that are going to win in this communication battle in the future. And it's easier in politics because politics brings the whole country together. It's much harder in brands, but the same principles apply. How do you spread ideas in a world which is connected by technology and where every person is able to be a broadcaster, be a medium that can take it out, but also every person who sees, who hears this or sees this on YouTube or wherever it goes, is going to be able to comment below. So if they feel strongly about it, they can put together a group that talks about this, and then that moves into oh, gee whiz, this is a really good way of trying to get our ideas to spread, and away it goes. So yeah, that's where I'm thinking at the moment. That's what I'm interested in.
It's fascinating stuff. So thank you. How can people get hold of you, Walter, if they want to find out more, actually engage with you for spreading ideas?
I'm actually reasonably easy to find, just Googling it, but probably Walter Pike at gmail.com or Walter Pike at pike.co.za, or on Twitter, Walter Pike, or I'm kind of everywhere as Walter Pike.
Yeah, I know. If you just Google Walter Pike, you'll find. Yeah. And directed activism is what you very much involved in.
It's one of it's my sort of strategic methodologies. So if you want to work on building a marketing or communication strategy, the way I think about it is through this directed activism methodology. You're not going to get, I'm probably not the person to get hold of if you just want somebody to put together a whole lot of tweets and do a content, just produce content and just stick it out there, because that's not going to interest me that much. But if you're really interested in getting involved and trying to understand how these ideas spread, that's what I do. But obviously, I I've been working up into various African territories on. I've got a 3-day course called the Digital Marketing Boot Camp, which teaches people everything about marketing, how marketing fits together, how that fits together with traditional search engine marketing, search engine optimization, content marketing, how search engines work, how social, what the social platforms are doing. And then I've been doing quite a lot of work lately, actually, because it fits into the directed activism, although it's just a kind of like a slice of it, and that's on managing social media crises. So what I'll do is I'll help clients and agencies put together a way of being ready before there's a crisis, how to act during a crisis, and what to do after the crisis to be able to learn and maximize their things. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing mostly at the moment.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much. Everything from like your personal stories with your daughter and that to the understanding the expanse of conversation today. And it's it's fascinating stuff. So maybe just any parting thoughts then on anything you would want to say to people in order to help us have more conversations that count.
Well, I mean, I actually think that and I think this is really the thing. If you feel about something, please do something about it. Comment on it. Because either you'll get put right. If your thinking is a bit hasn't been thought through, because you'll learn from other people around you, or else you might change somebody else. And if you change somebody else, they might change somebody else, and they might change somebody else, and who knows, you might change the world. And I mean, I think each of us have the capacity to change the world. We just need to do it. And for me, if I felt as though I've managed to change some people's lives, hopefully for the better, then gee whiskers, I must have been an asset on this planet. And for me, that's how I would measure how successful or unsuccessful I am, around how many people changed because they were in contact with something that I did.
Great. Well,
thanks, Joanna.
Thank you, and go keep changing the world.
Thanks.
I'm Talana Simpson, and this has been Let's Talk Communication. For more information on my guest, Walter Pike, and on the show, you can go to my website, which is talkcommunication.innercoaching.co.za. You can also find me on iTunes and YouTube. Thanks for listening.